Good afternoon, class. My topic is smart infusion pumps and dose error reduction software, looked at through the lens of the nurse anesthesia practice. The question I'm answering is simple to state and hard to solve. These pumps are marketed as a safety technology, but does the device itself make anesthesia safer? Or does the safety come from the system built around it? That's the argument I'll walk through today. I'll cover 6 areas. First, the standards and regulations that govern smart pumps, from ISMP, the FDA, and NIST. Second, the legal and ethical duties created by the digital record these pumps generate. Third, patient safety. What the evidence actually shows and where it stops short. Fourth, security and privacy, since a connected pump is also a network endpoint. Fifth, workflow in the OR and why models built for inpatient units don't transfer cleanly. And I close with a path forward for anesthesia departments. Here's the central claim. In anesthesia, we titrate vasoactive agents, sedatives, hypnotics, opiates, and paralytics within narrow therapeutic windows. An error in that setting isn't a paperwork problem. It's immediately life-threatening. Smart pumps are supposed to catch that error before it reaches the patient. My argument through this whole presentation is that the pump's safety value depends far less on the device itself than on the system built around it, the library, the training, the verification process, and the culture. Before I get into the evidence, let me define the 3 pieces. DERS or DERS, dose error reduction software, checks every program against a drug library with hard and soft dosing limits. Auto programming pulls a verified order directly into the pump and documents back to the record, cutting out manual entry. And the AIMS link, bidirectional communication with the anesthesia information management system, is what turns the pump from a standalone device into a networked one. These functions are promoted as the informatics answer the programming risk. The evidence supports that, but only conditionally, as the condition is the theme of this talk. 3 bodies shape how these pumps actually are used. ISMP sets the consensus guidelines, a governed drug library with hard and soft limits, careful alert design, and a target of keeping overrides and basic mode use low. The FDA's Infusion Pump Improvement Initiative pre-market device review and adds cybersecurity expectations across the product's life cycle, not just at launch. And NIST fills the gap neither of those covers. The network side with a practice guide for securing wireless infusion pumps inside a healthcare delivery organization. The point I want to land here is that a network pump is regulated for its software and its connectivity, not just for the dosing accuracy. This is where the legal and ethical piece comes in. Every alert, every override, every programming entry lands somewhere. In a QI law at a minimum, and in the AIMS or EHR when intra-op is enabled. That's durable, time-stamped account of what the clinician actually did. So, when a defined safety step exists and gets skipped, the exposure isn't just about whether harm occurred, it's a deviation itself. I want to be direct about the ethical tension here. Anesthesia is time pressure. Everyone in the room knows that, but non-maleficence doesn't bend to convenience. The independent check exists specifically to catch the error that a confident, experienced clinician cannot see in themselves. Now the evidence for what actually works. In a pediatrics anesthesia quality improvement project, adding an independent double check drove serious programming adverse events down to essentially zero. Only one event occurred, and it happened because the verification step was skipped. In a multi-hospital study, bidirectional pump to EHR interrupt was associated with a 16% reduction in IV medication administration errors. An earlier single-site work in the ICU and OR showed roughly a 50% drop in syringe pump errors after go live. The pattern across all three is the same. Every one of these gains came from a pump plus a system around it, never from the device operating alone. But the failure modes haven't disappeared. Wrong patient errors still happen even though fully featured smart pumps. Wrong library selection bypasses the limits the pump is supposed to enforce. Bad manual programming shows up during the rapid high pressure moments of a case. And alert overrides only protect the patient while the clinician stays inside the guarded library. The moment someone drops the basic mode, that protection is gone. Here's the honest limitation in the literature. What's being shown consistently is fewer error events, not a consistent drop in actual patient harm. DERS or DERS sets a ceiling of how much protection is possible. Providers' behavior decides how much of the ceiling is actually used. Security is the fourth piece, and I'll frame it this way. Connectivity is simultaneously the feature and the risk. A lot of the fleet in use today is 8 to 10 years old. Running software is as difficult or impossible to patch. Sitting on the same network as auto programming traffic. And every bidirectional link, every connection of the AIMS or EHR is another path that has to be secure. This matters clinically because a compromise of dosing parameters is a patient safety event. It isn't only a data breach. If a pump reboots unexpectedly or shows unfamiliar settings, reporting that is a security duty, not an inconvenience. This slide is about a mismatch. Most hospital models were built for the inpatient ward. Barcode medication administration. A pharmacist verifies orders scanned at the bedside and an order that gets pushed to the pump. None of that matches anesthesia reality. In the OR, the provider selects the drug and the concentration by hand. At the point of care, pumps here are used mainly for medications, not maintenance fluid. Emergent boluses and rapid titration breaks the assumption the inpatient model was built on. And that's a big reason interoperability rollouts often stop short to the peri-op area entirely. The workflow underneath it was never designed for how anesthesia actually works. Here's a number that surprised me the most. Even on a general floor, only about 79% of nurses use the guarded drug library for IV medications more than 90% of the time. The most common reasons were a missing medication or concentration in the library, needing non-guarded basic modes in an emergency, and unusual concentrations or rapid emergent dosing. Now, think about which of those three conditions describes anesthesia on a regular day. All three. So, this compliance gap that shows up occasionally on the ward is the default condition in the OR. Exactly where the consequences of losing DERS protection are highest. So, what actually fixes this? Let's go over the options. Build the library for the anesthesia specifically, with the concentrations and titration range provider actually use, not a copy of the ward list. Governing with clinicians, pull anesthesia providers into library governance directly so gaps get closed instead of their routed around. Feed the OR's tempo, redesign auto programming and verification steps around emergent boluses dosing and titration. No ward-based maintenance infusions. And keep investing, sustain the education and the system level data review, because this isn't a self-fixing pump. Someone has to keep watching the data and acting on it. I'll close with four levers that are entirely within our control as providers and department. Verification, discipline-independent double checks, specifically on high alert programming, governance, and anesthesia-appropriate drug library that's kept current, not set once and forgotten. Cybersecurity, a connected pump infrastructure that actually secure and maintained. And workflow, processes built for how the OR actually runs, not borrowed wholesale from the world. My overall point is this: informatics doesn't take the clinician out of the safety equation. If anything, in anesthesia, it puts more weight on the judgment, the discipline, and the system thinking the clinician brings to the technology. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.